On special occasions, we like to celebrate with some kind of flowers, and this tutorial will show you how to simulate particles within Blender to create these amazing rose petals. They come in different colors and sizes, and it's part of my 22 PBR petal pack that I put together for special occasions in which you might need a very high texture, 2K actually textures, to create your assets, your digital assets. As you can see right here, you have different maps that the flowers, the petal flowers have. Like right here you have displacement, bump, specular, diffuse, the normal maps. You can also have this material, this double-sided material, so in case that you can use the front and back side, they are correctly labeled. This project can also be imported onto Blender 2.8 and you may use it as well on the Eevee real-time engine. So let's get started with the tutorial right now. Let me set up my scene right now so you can see what keyboard keys I'm going to be pressing on. And right now I'm going to select an image because what I want to do is to create a grid, texture grid shape. Basically I can sculpt it, but I'm going to be using a grid subdivided times 3 and then use the simple method. In this case I get this subdivided grid on Blender, and now what I'm going to do is to rename this as the petal mesh, and then I'm going to create a second grid or plane. Actually, I'm going to enter into edit mode, and then I'm going to go into point or vertex selection. Then I'm going to press Alt M, and then everything gets into a single point. Now I'm going to drag that point all the way up to the head of this petal flower, and then I'm going to press E to extrude. I am working in the front orthogonal view by pressing 1 on the numpad key, so that way the viewer gets locked into this position. Now that I'm close to this other point, I'm going to select it and then press F. This automatically will fill F these 2 points. Now what I want to do is to create a projection to cut my first and second grids. I'm going to select both, first the petal, now then the grid, then I'm going to go into edit mode and I'm going to select knife project. That is going to do it from the bar or from the search bar menu. Now I have this plane that it's been cut, and then I'm going to change my selection to face selection down here, as you can see it, face selection. Then I'm going to press C for circle select, and I'm going to select all these faces that I don't like, and then I'm going to press X, and then I'm going to press F, XF, 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 which means delete faces, X, and then F in edit mode will grant you to delete those pesky faces. Okay, XF, XF. Alright, we have our petal right there. Now we need to XF, this one as well must go. Now I'm going to remove doubles, which I search it through the search bar by pressing the space bar. And I'm going to be skipping through the texturing part, since I will assume that if you are interested on the PBR pack, you by now know how to texture a PBR realistic material. And now I'm going to create a grid, because here's our petal already textured. This one is not exclusively PBR. I'm doing it as quickly as I can for the sake of the time, of your time in this tutorial. And then I'm going to create a particle system, which is going to be using that object that I just created. So you can see it right there on the renderer. I have the object selected, and now I'm going to select that specific mesh. But we are looking at this in the wrong way. So what we need to do is to turn this particle and then apply all transform to deltas and play back. Now all the petals are falling correctly, but they are all the same. They look very boring. Well, this is kind of our baby step into producing a better particle system. So the first thing we're going to do is to work with the rotations because they are all falling on the same time and on the same plane, and we don't want that. We want to create some sort of random variations. So we're going to extend their lifetime to be emitted until frame 200, and also we're going to be playing with these velocities, randomizing them a little bit so that they can fall first and second all the other particles behind. And we're going to be emitting not from verts, because if you select verts, this is what you're going to get. This is not what we want. We want to emit from faces. Therefore, this grid, this plane, must have a lot of faces. That is what you saw earlier we did on the tutorial. So now I'm going to tell you a nifty little trick I like to use. Instead of using simulations for cloth or soft bodies, I like to drive a displacement texture onto the mesh. So I'm going to be adding a displacement modifier, and then I'm going to create in that displacement a new texture. You can see it right here. Right now we don't see it, so we go back into the texture displacement modifier, add a new texture. Now that texture is going to be available right here. So let me get this. Come on. Okay, there we go. I just got rid of the displacement texture that I have right here. So now, and sure enough, there it is. It's on the displacement modifier list. So I'm going to switch this into a very big distorted noise. That's the choice I'm going with. And you can see right there, texture type, distorted noise. I am adjusting this. And the next thing we want to do is to drive this through an object. So I'm going to select that object, which is a null, an empty, and it depends on how I'm going to move it, that the displacement or the displacement texture is going to be affected. So that's very handy because I want to move that object and see the texture mapping coordinates reflect onto my petal. See? So it's looking like a soft wind is moving the petal, and for that simulation every other petal as well from the particle simulation is being affected. So that's a nifty trick. We are driving the modifications, the shape of the petal through that null, through that empty. So right now we got a first degree adaptation for that. Now we are going to make the petals fall and collide with this grid or plane, but it will not do it because it's just a simple plane. So we need to add a solidify modifier. So the rigid bodies, or actually the collisions, will be calculated better. And right now I'm modifying stickiness, friction, damping, and other effects when the particles do collide with this floor. So we're going to add more particles, and actually let's see, yes, see that jumping effect that you have, that's the damping. And of course if we move the emitter, the particles will inherit their rotation and their velocities from the emitter. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you continue to move or rotate your emitter object, it will also affect the particles, thus enhancing the effect for additional rotations. Now that's exactly what we want. We are also going to add just a little wind force. With Shift A, select forces, wind, and now you can go to the simulations tab, which is the last tab on the properties bar. And from there on, the wind right now, it's a little bit stronger. And I am also adding extra rotations. I'm inserting keyframes by pressing the letter I on the empty. So when I press I, a lot of options pop up, so I can create a new keyframe on any channel I want. In this case, I'm creating keyframes on rotations, also for the emitter. And now you can see we don't get much difference with a constant wind strength. But if I change the wind strength, then of course we get the particle simulation working just as nice. Fantastic. Now let's advance some more. I see that there is no way that the petals will rotate inherent velocity and rotation like any other simulation of rigid bodies will do. Since we are driving this just as a simple emitter, we want to fake that rotation in the particle itself, and therefore I'm going to place, or insert rather, in the rotation on the y-axis many keyframes along the timeline, and thus I'm getting this effect. Check it out. Fantastic. Now it's feeling like a wind affecting the particle's rotation. Yes, perfect. Now when they fall very straight. They shoot like an arrow against the floor. We don't want that. What we want is to diminish the particle's stickiness to the floor, and also the particle damping. We want to manage it so that they will bounce just like they are right now. If you will see a real life petal flower falling onto the ground, you may not see it bounce that much, but when you see it bounce with a lot of wind, then of course the particle, or in this case the petal, will indeed bounce away from the place where it fell first. So that's what we want. Let's hide everything else and let's play back the simulation to see how it looks. Alright, looking at a little bit better. Still looks like a very unison or very fake simulated copy, but we are getting better from the first simulation. So I did a further simulation using a head as a collision object to see how it would look, how they will rotate. And of course, we are adjusting the camera focus. It's very important that when you're creating digital assets, you get the correct information on your lens camera so that your animation will look real. So as we see right here, the face is colliding. So how do we import this magnificent library of petals? We have many. And this is the way you're going to do it. Let's first create a plane. Very nice plane floor right here. Switch to solid by pressing Z. And now I'm going to go into the file append. Now I'm going to navigate to the rose petals and assets, and then I'm going to go into the group folder. And here you can choose or select any petal you would like. So I'm going to append it from the library, and I'm looking through my camera so you can see it right here. I'm going to press Shift Z, and of course we don't see anything because the light is not bouncing off this mesh. So let me just switch this here, and make sure also that you are using nodes, and switch right here over to materials so you can see that your material is effectively being used in the scene. So now I'm going to place this back here so you can see that the light will affect the material as well. So I'm going to rotate it. Control spacebar will bring me that shortcut to manipulate for the manipulators. I'm sorry. And there it is. That's our petal, and it works pretty nicely. Now I'm going to add a background right here on the world tab, environment, and open up an HDRI texture so I can see it a little bit better, and so can you. So there it is. That's how you bring an asset from the library. Long ago, very long ago, I did this simple viewport animation. It's not finished in Softimage, and we're going to try to do something similar in Blender by texturing many different petal flowers with our library. So I'm going to duplicate that grid, and then I'm going to create a new particle system. Let's rename that petal particles. Seems fittingly. Now I'm going to switch the emission to 300 particles, and then I'm going to subdivide this 2 times so we will get a lot of face grid, polygon grid. That's not enough. Sorry, I'm going to apply it, and then I'm going to subdivide it again. Now we have many different faces from where we can emit the particles, and that's what we want. I'm going to select the object right here on the render tab, and then I'm going to make sure that we have our timeline visible so that we can see the simulation. So if you press play right now, then you're going to get the particles aligned in a different way. We already knew that. Now we're applying the transformation, but we don't see the particles rotate. Why is that? Well, you have to just modify here the velocity just a little bit so that the cache will get reset. Don't ask me why Blender does this, but sometimes you need to touch on the velocity or the rotation of the particle for it to inherit the recent applied rotation of the main particle that you're going to be using for your simulation. Okay, so they are still falling in the wrong way, but sure enough, they are all textured, or our petal R, it's giving its influence. Now let me disconnect, I'm sorry, the displacement map, because I want to use a displacement modifier which can use a texture just like we saw. So I'm going to switch to texture on the texture tab, and then I'm going to add a distorted noise, and then I'm going to scale it very high, and I'm going to, yeah, probably going to use that, and then I'm going to lower the strength, and I am also going to add by Control C, selecting location. I just created an empty and then copied its location to the petal, and then I moved it, and now I'm going to use the strength. I just selected the empty to drive the effect of the displacement texture, this texture right here. So I'm going to name it. I'm going to go back into this one, and now I have, there it is, a complete manipulation of the texture coordinates through the empty object. That's the purpose of it. So if you move it, of course, you're going to see the particles also be affected as well, just like we saw on the first part of this tutorial. Why am I doing the same thing again? Because this is just a little trick that you can use many times depending on your animation and how close the camera is to your petals, because the petals are fragile and they are also very soft in the wind, and that's what we want to simulate right here. So marvelously, we are creating the simulation using only one material, which is the petal R. But what if we want to use more materials? Well, first let's create the simulation so that it will run appropriately. We are also going to use this plane as a shadow catcher, and as you can see, the particles are falling through. So we need to apply thickness to the floor so they won't fall. And once we do that, we also need to raise up the particle friction, the particle damping, and the soft body damping. And thus we see the particles jump around. And if you don't want them to jump around, just raise up the particle damping or the particle friction in this case. Damping is how much they bounce after they hit the floor. Or in case in Blender, the case in Blender is it's probably backwards. Anyways, I'm going to go into the particle simulations properties, and then I'm going to select self effect, and then I'm going to use a turbulence because I now need to turbulence the position of the particles. Whoops, that was too much. The force is too strong with this one. Let me lower this one down, probably 0.02. Yes, most likely. And now I'm going to do a little playback again. Oh no, this is just too much. And it's because of the flow. If you lower down the flow, then you will get a much smoother fall for the petals. So the self effect number 1 I'm going to use, it's turbulence with a strength of 0.5. Let me see how that looks. Okay, it looks kind of nice. Yeah, finally, it's looking more organic, and that's what we wanted from the beginning. And let's use 0.32. I think this works pretty much Yeah, like a real life petal fall. Okay, now we're going to go into the second cell force for this effect. And what we're going to do, it's a vortex. Whoops, too much power. Let's lower it down to 0.25. Yeah, it's looking good, but still too much power in the end. And hold on, let me raise up the visibility like for 5 kilometers and also for the camera for 5 kilometers. I really hate it when I go back, dolly back on my camera and then everything disappears. So 5K is just my average viewing distance for anything I do on Blender. So let's go back and try to fix that force. Second force, probably let's lower it down until we get, for the maximum rate, let's play with 0.23. And also the normal strength will be 0.125. This will assure that by the end of the animation, no stronger wind will affect them because they have their limits. So I'm just unchecking minimum and just checking maximum. So no one can reach beyond 0.2.3. Let's see how this goes. Okay, they keep on moving. Yes, they kind of look nice. I'm not bothered, although it doesn't look realistic, but I kind of like the petals to keep on moving, although they should be frictioning more with the floor. I kind of like it like that. No, this is just too much. Of course, you can animate forces through the timeline, so you can get different random organic effects, like this one right here. It looks good. Looks really good like that. So let's render. Let's see how this goes. Oh, by the way, on the library assets of the petals, you have the options to import the entire set. The entire set of petals, once you have created your simulation, it's really easy actually. Let me show you how I will do it. But first of all, let me pick up this focus for the camera, focus point for the camera. You can do it many different ways. I'm just doing this as quickly as I can regarding your time. And now if I press Shift Z, I can see that my flowers have soft bokeh effect, and it's pretty nice. And let me get this onto the background so you can see it. It's pretty nice. Awesome. It's working like a charm. There it is. But it's a little bit boring just to see one kind of petal flower. So let's change that. I'm going to be using, instead of one single texture, I'm going to be using all of the textures that I've included on the pack. So I'm going to append the entire group. This is how you're going to do it. You're going to go to append all petals, and now you have them right here on your scene. Just move them away from the camera. You may delete these names as well. I'm going to do so right now. I'm going to delete all of these names. Those are just for identifying purposes. Of course, every mesh, it's identified with their corrective name. And Shift Z, I can see it right here. Every petal, and now I'm going to use that group. So I'm going to switch in the outliner to group up to group listing, select my emitter, and then I'm going to tell it that switch to a group, and from the group I'm going to select just the group that I appended. So now I'm going to sit 1, sit 0 to reset the cache, and now my particles are simulating using the entire group, and you can see it right here. It's magnificent. So that way you can import different petals and form your own groups and then use them inside your Blender scene. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe.